Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Molly. I'm a gut health registered dietitian that specializes in acid reflux, and I recovered from acid reflux and severe GERD, and now I help others do the same. In today's video, I'm going to be reviewing the Acid Watcher Diet book by Dr. Aviv. I have gotten so many questions about this book, so I decided to pick it up myself, and I will give you my full review today, whether or not I think that it is worth doing, and if you really need to avoid all of the foods that are in this book on the list that you should avoid. So without further ado, we'll dive in. But if you have not already subscribed to my channel, please be sure to subscribe down below. Leave me a comment if you're new, let me know. If you're struggling with reflux, definitely follow me on Instagram and TikTok, mollypelletier.rd, for more acid reflux tips and tricks. And I look forward to connecting with you. Initial impression of this book, he talked about esophageal cancer way too much. I think that there was a little bit of fear-mongering in the beginning of this book. I even felt like a little bit of anxiety reading this book as someone who had struggled with acid reflux for many, many years. I think he talks about it a little too much. And one thing to keep in mind is that Dr. Aviv, he's super smart, well trained as a doctor. He's not a dietitian. So registered dietitians, we go to school for 4 to 6 years. In my case, 6 years. I went to undergrad and graduate school for nutritional science. He may have some nutrition background, but he's not a dietitian. And so he went to medical school, has a ton of medical background, but sometimes doctors can kind of get in the weeds with nutrition research and not really see the big picture. So I'm going to be breaking down a few things that I really like that he says and mentions, but a few ways he may not be seeing the big picture. So he mentions things like healthy fats just right off the bat, and I'm really glad that he is not, afraid of fat. A lot of people are afraid of fat, especially with acid reflux, but we need fat. So fat plays an important role in our nutrient absorption, in the way that our body functions hormonally, and gut health. We can't have healthy bowel movements if we don't eat fat in our diet. So we need that. Fats act as a lubrication. So I'm really glad that he does mention fat, and he's a supporter of continuing to eat healthy fats in your diet like olive oil, olives, nuts, and seeds. I also love that he mentions omega-3 rich foods like fatty fish. But one thing that I've noticed is that he says that kale is a good source of omega-3. Well, kale may have a small amount of omega-3, but kale has absolutely zero fat, so I don't really know where he's getting this. Omega-3s are an essential fatty acid that is really supportive for your body in decreasing inflammation. Dr. Aviv also talks a lot about fiber, which I think is great. Fiber is essential for your gut microbiome, for elevating healthy levels of microbes in your gut, and preventing constipation, which can be a root cause of acid reflux. The way in which he talks about fiber is confusing. So he talks about doing a daily minimum of 1 pound of vegetables above a pH of 5, which I'll get into the pH thing in a second, half of which should be consumed raw. For a lot of people that I see with digestive issues, they actually do better with cooked vegetables. If you're struggling with IBS, bloating, if you see any food in your stool, you may want to do cooked vegetables instead of raw. So I feel like this recommendation is really kind of random. I don't know why he's recommending that part of them have to be raw. I don't really think that that is evidence-based. And I also think putting vegetables in terms of pounds is not really helpful for people. This got confusing even for me, who has a really, a strong knowledge of portion size. This section was confusing. I think that he should just talk about them in cups or servings or whole fruit foods. That being said, I'm all for increasing fruits and vegetables in your diet. I think that that can play a really big role. But it's interesting that he doesn't really mention FODMAPs or IBS, because a lot of people with acid reflux also have IBS, and it may be difficult for them to introduce fruits and vegetables if that's not something that they're used to having a lot of on a daily basis. And that's where working with a registered dietitian can be really, really helpful. So we can help you reincorporate these things in a comfortable, accessible way. I also love the tips here about not eating 3 hours before bed. I think that's a really, really great tip for people with acid reflux. And I like that he gives you a meal schedule. Meal schedule and meal timing is really important. That's something that I do work with my clients a lot on, because it can help you eat in a comfortable portion at night so you can avoid going to bed too full, which can trigger reflux symptoms at night. Also love that he talks about reducing stress. You guys know I am a huge proponent of reducing stress in order to heal acid reflux, and that's why I designed Flora, to give you guys the tools to really reduce stress and heal your gut. and finally overcome acid reflux, because stress is a major contributing factor to acid reflux. Stress does change the way our body can digest our food, changes our stomach acid production, our enzyme production, so we have to manage stress in order to really overcome digestive issues and heal our nervous system, which is the gut and the brain are connected via the enteric nervous system. So essentially our nervous system is our digestion. So I'm glad that he brings in a lot of the research about the stress response. That is so pivotal in a lot of my work with my clients. Okay, when he starts to talk about the pH of foods, that's where it gets a little bit more confusing than I think it needs to be. I think that he does a nice job of outlining a lot of different foods that are, in that high pH range, but a lot of the fruits that he mentioned, and fruit is probably the biggest place that I disagree with him. So he mentions the fruits that you could have above pH of 5 are banana, pear, specifically Bosc pear, papaya, cantaloupe, honeydew, watermelon, lychee, and avocados. For a lot of people, they may not have access to Bosc pear, papaya, watermelon, and lychee. So that takes out 4 of the fruits he's saying you could have in this first elimination phase. But then he does go on to say that you can have berries in the higher acidity fruits cooked. I feel like that's confusing because you immediately see that list that you can only have those fruits, and that is anxiety provoking. Elimination diets I'm not a big fan of because of the anxiety that can go along with them. And I think that that is a little bit misleading. So I do think that including berries and kiwis are really important for your gut health. And the more that you restrict your diet, the more that impacts gut microbial diversity. And especially if gut imbalance is one of your root causes of acid reflux, we don't want to be limiting your gut microbiome diversity. We want you to be able to have these foods. So having them with a higher pH food item is kind of what he's recommending in this book, but he only says it 1 or 2 times. And that's what I do with my clients too. So when we're incorporating berries and kiwis, it's almost always with a higher pH food like toast and sun butter or oatmeal. We're almost always pairing that with something, especially if we're reintroducing berries and kiwis, we're pairing them with a food, and you may naturally do that anyways. Like pairing that with a chia seed pudding or an oatmeal is a great way to incorporate those fruits, so you don't have just the fruit in your system with nothing to buffer the acidity of it. So that is one place that I disagree a little bit, is that we have to avoid those fruits, because I think they can be incorporated, especially if you're incorporating them with a higher pH item like the oatmeals. And I think paying attention to the pH of foods is very, very stressful. It's much easier to just give someone a few foods that may be acidic that they should avoid. And we already know these foods, right? Like citrus and vinegar, tomatoes, those are like the main things. I think that excluding all the other vegetables that may be on the lower range of pH is not really effective or validated, because, pH can differ plant to plant. It can differ recipe to recipe. So I haven't seen that be effective at all. And I think that, just avoiding those main triggers like coffee, onions, garlic, tomatoes, citrus, that's going to be more than enough. You don't need to get more restrictive than that, is my opinion. He also mentions seed oils, and he feels that they are acidic because of their extraction process, which involves chemicals and preservatives. I have never seen anything to suggest this. I do choose to cook with avocado oil and season with olive oil, but that's a taste preference. I don't think you need to avoid seed oils altogether if that's the oil that you can afford and that's the oil that you prefer cooking with. The research about seed oils has gotten blown way out of proportion because people are saying that they're inflammatory because they're high in omega-6. While they do contain omega-6, we just want to make sure that our omega-3 to omega-6 ratio in our diet is balanced. So if you consume seed oils, making sure that you're also consuming fatty fish like with omega-3s like salmon or tuna, and walnuts and chia seeds also have omega-3s. Olive oil and canola oil are actually 2 sources of omega-3s, and canola oil actually has more omega-3s than olive oil. So just some food for thought there, and try to ignore all those people that are wandering the grocery store and taking videos of themselves pointing out that seed oils are poison. That is the quickest way to point someone out who doesn't know how to read research, because the research on that is not suggesting that those oils are poisonous. There's actually a lot of research on canola oil and how it's heart healthy. I may get some hate for saying that, but it's the truth. Also very interesting that Dr. Aviv says peanut butter is okay if it's freshly ground instead of processed industrial made peanut butter, because he thinks that industrial peanut butter is more acidic. I have no idea where he's getting that information, to be honest, and I actually find peanut butter to be a trigger for some people with acid reflux, so I usually recommend almond butter or sunflower seed butter. But if you love peanut butter and it doesn't trigger you, no worries at all. It's one of those individual things that you kind of have to test out for yourself. But I think whatever peanut butter that you can afford, preferably one that, you know, the only ingredients is peanuts and salt, that's great. But if you can't find that near you, then, you know, whatever nut butter you can find, because nuts are a great source of healthy fats. I'm glad that he doesn't demonize gluten. So I see a lot of people demonizing gluten for acid reflux, and there's no research to suggest this. In fact, gluten can be a great source of complex carbohydrates and fiber for people with digestive issues. So I like that he does recommend whole grain breads and Ezekiel bread. So it's gonna be great for people with digestive issues. He brings up ginger as a spice option for seasoning food and beverages, and ginger isn't something that I would just right off the bat recommend for acid reflux. While I love ginger, it has great benefits for digestion and motility and nausea. Ginger can be a little bit irritating for someone with acid reflux and gastritis, so it wouldn't be the first thing that I recommend seasoning with, but that's just my experience with acid reflux as a dietitian who sees a lot of people with acid reflux and who also had acid reflux. I love ginger, but sometimes it's really not well tolerated, so I'm surprised he put this in here because he seems to be really conservative with ingredients. But I do like that he's incorporating, you know, other seasonings like sumac and the garlic alternative that I can't pronounce. I think it's pronounced asafoetida, but either way, I will link it down below. It's a powder that can be used in replacement of garlic powder. But I like that he talks about fresh herbs and other things that you can season your food so it's not boring. On his healing phase food list, he is not including seeds, and I'm not sure why, because I love flax seeds and pumpkin seeds and chia seeds for people with digestive issues. When used correctly, they can be super, super helpful in lifting magnesium levels, zinc levels, both of which those nutrients are super important for digestive health. So I'm really not sure why it's not on the healing food list. And I find this food list to be really anxiety provoking and restrictive, because he's saying you can have grilled chicken, but your shrimp has to be boiled. And he's saying these are the only seasonings you can have. There's only 4 of them, which if you have my cookbook, you know there are more than 4 seasonings that you can use. I find this to be really, you know, anxiety provoking, and I don't think that knowing the pH of foods is really that helpful. Again, I really just think the main acid reflux triggers that we all know and we have seen, and our doctors have handed us that sheet, those are the main ones. And I don't think getting in the weeds of like the pH of different foods is really helpful. In fact, it can be harmful for your gut microbiome because of all the reasons that I have mentioned. So yeah, this list with all of the different pHs is way too confusing. I recommend not really paying attention, but I do think the recipes in here are great. I like that he gives a meal plan, and I think the recipes are really reasonable. They are a little bit low in protein though. I personally recommend 20 to 30 grams of protein per meal. We need protein to produce digestive enzymes, to produce stomach acid, and for our gut to function. And so a lot of these recipes are pretty low in protein, probably because he doesn't have a background in nutrition and isn't really sure like how much protein people need, but a lot of these recipes are kind of low, especially breakfast, which tends to be a place where people need even more protein if they're healing from adrenal fatigue or if they have any hormone issues. I get a lot of questions about yogurt, whether or not that's too acidic, should I be eating it? And I like that he says that, you know, yogurt has these health benefits and it should be something that you still incorporate, because I agree. I think yogurt is really beneficial, and if it feels too acidic on the skin or the tissue of the esophagus, you can always buffer it in an overnight oats situation, or pair it with oats, or make my oat cups on Flora, something like that to buffer that acidity. But it does have great healing benefits as a fermented food. So if you can tolerate dairy, I do recommend incorporating it, or you could do a coconut yogurt for the probiotics as well. I like that he mentions that you can slowly reincorporate things back in once you've done a period of healing. And so that's the way that I also work with clients, is like we wait till their symptoms are gone or really well under control, and then we start to reincorporate a few things like cooking the onions, cooking the garlic. That definitely makes a big difference. I like that he also recommends like a single cup of coffee a day, because it's really important to me that my clients are able to have that cup of coffee again, if that's what you love. And so that is always the goal, to reincorporate things that you love. So I like that he's talking about, reincorporating that cup of coffee. His thoughts on alcohol I find really, really interesting. He says that you should always have vodka as your alcohol of choice because of the pH. And he also says you should have it on the rocks, not in a cocktail, which I don't think so. I mean, like, having vodka on the rocks is a lot as you swallow. Like, I would always recommend to even have it with a sparkling water, because the ice in that is going to break the bubbles, and it's not going to be as carbonated, and you can just mix it a few times and burst the bubbles. I think having a water with it is better than just on the rocks, but I don't know, it's been a while since I had a vodka on the rocks, so maybe I need to try again. Sounds like pretty intense. A few last things about the recipes. They do look pretty good, and I just wanted to mention though one thing that I think could be improved. He mentions a recipe about lima bean hummus, and I'm like, why lima beans? I'm sorry if you like lima beans, but why not edamame? I have a really great edamame hummus recipe in my dips and dressings freebie, or also on the Flora app. You can definitely check that out. I'll post both things down below so that you can get access to these. But the edamame hummus is so good, and I think way better than lima bean hummus. Edamame hummus also has iron and magnesium, a couple nutrients that are often low in people with digestive issues. So I will link that down below so you can grab it. He also mentions post-meal walks, and I have mixed feelings about this. I think that sometimes it can be helpful if you have slow motility and you want to move things around, but post-meal walks, sometimes if you've had a bigger meal, sometimes it can draw blood flow away from the abdomen and to the limbs and kind of halt digestion. So I recommend experimenting for yourself with that, if the post-meal walk feels good to you or if it feels not great to you. This is super individual, and I have gone through periods previously with my reflux where the post-meal walk felt awful. I needed to just chill after a meal. Depending on how your nervous system is, if you're someone who has a really hyperactive nervous system, you're working on switching out of fight or flight and into rest and digest, maybe the post-meal walk wouldn't be a great idea. But there is research to suggest that the post-meal walk can tighten the lower esophageal sphincter. So if it works well for you, give it a try. But I would recommend it be a leisurely walk and not like a power walk. Love, love, love that he talks about diaphragmatic breathing and yoga. So Flora has a ton of acid reflux friendly yoga classes, meaning there's no downward dog, there's no deep twisting, forward fold. So it's acid reflux friendly, designed just for you. And the diaphragmatic breathing we do in almost every single class. I just uploaded recently a breathing exercise for gut healing meditation, and that is super, super helpful. We talk about diaphragmatic breathing. In my interview with Dr. Mukta about pelvic floor health, we also talk about diaphragmatic breathing and how important that is for nervous system, for constipation, for pelvic floor. So fascinating, and I'm glad that he brings that up. There's a ton of research on yoga for digestive health, so I highly recommend checking out Flora, my app, which has a huge collection of acid reflux friendly classes, how to heal your acid reflux, step-by-step healing modules, as well as meditations and recipes, tons of acid reflux recipes, so you don't have to go through your healing journey alone. You can take me with you in your pocket, and you have all of these tools for you at any moment, and it's really all the tools that helped me personally heal and that I'm using to heal my clients as well. So you can get the Flora app down below and use my exclusive YouTube discount to start your account, and you can also use the free risk-free trial to explore all of the healing tools of Flora. So you can start today for free, totally risk-free, explore the tools, see what you think, and I can't wait to welcome you. I hope this review was helpful. I am so glad you guys brought my attention to this book, because now I will know where you're coming from when you're asking about this book. A lot of you have told me that it feels really, really restrictive to you, and I totally see why. And my take in summary is that You don't need to be this restrictive. Knowing the common acid reflux triggers is restrictive enough, and limiting your diet more than that will be harmful for the microbiome. And we can certainly include berries and kiwis and other fruits that may be slightly acidic into meals, buffering them with other foods. We can also incorporate things like cooked garlic, cooked onions, if they are not your trigger foods. So it's really important to, do a little bit of experimentation, make sure that you're optimizing all of the other healing aspects of acid reflux, like the yoga, meditation, breathing exercises, meal timing, bed elevation if you want to. If you have not already subscribed to my channel, be sure to subscribe down below, and I will see you at the next video.